Hello there, all you lovely people. Once again, this is Dax, and on this video, we're going to be discussing dream interpretation. Specifically, we're going to be discussing the 3 layers of dream symbol meaning. Now, I've got a sword here. The reason why this is here is because later on in the video, I am going to use this to illustrate what exactly I mean by the 3 layers of a dream symbol's meaning. But for right now, we're just going to sit this thing right down there. Now, before we get started here, if you enjoy the content of this video, I do ask that you reach down there, you click that like button and subscribe button. It will really help the channel out. And also, if you are interested in this, there are many videos on my channel known as divinations videos. You will know them because they all have the same title, they all have the same picture. If you're interested in having a daily fortune told, just choose a divinations video at random, click on it, that will be your daily fortune. Now, on to the subject of dream interpretation and the 3 layers that must be taken into consideration in order to actually understand what a dream symbol means. Now, when it comes to dream interpretation, people always want to apply a rigid, static meaning to every symbol in the dream. It's because it's what we've been told to do. That's how it's described in most books. You know, you ask somebody what a symbol means, and they've got a hard, fast, rigid meaning of what that dream symbol represents. Well, it's a little more complicated than that. The reason why it's more complicated than that is because every single one of us, you, me, every family member, every friend in your life, everybody on the planet, we are all a unique individual. And the act of oversimplifying a symbol's meaning by saying that everything that appears in a dream has this specific meaning to it, that is failing to take into account the fact that we are all different people. And so everyone is going to have a slightly different meaning for every symbol in their dream. Now, what every dream interpreter needs to understand, whether they are interpreting their own dreams or someone else's, the meaning of every symbol exists in 3 layers. The bottom layer is the archetypal layer, the middle layer is the cultural layer, and the top layer is the personal layer. All 3 of these layers need to be taken into account. However, the upper layers tend to override the layers below them. I say tend to because there is some bleed through of the meaning. Now, of course, the first layer that we're going to talk about will be the bottom one, the archetypal layer. With the archetypal layer, you're dealing with Carl Jung's collective unconsciousness of the human race. The concept behind the archetypal layer is that all human beings have the same meaning for the same symbol. It does not matter what gender you are, what nationality you are, what ethnicity you are, what kind of surroundings you grew up in. On the archetypal layer, the dream symbol meaning for all human beings will be identical. Now, for those of you who are of more of a materialistic mindset, you could describe the meanings for dream symbols on the archetypal layer as being akin to pre-programmed. You can say that we're pre-programmed to assign these meanings to these symbols. If you're of a more spiritual mindset, you could say let the meaning of those symbols, they originate from God, they come from the oversoul of the human race. Depending on what your beliefs are, what's important about the archetypal layer is that it's the lowermost layer, it is the most expansive of all the layers, and on this layer, because you are a human being, psychologically you will assign the same meaning to the same symbols on this layer. Now, some of the examples of symbols and symbolic meanings on the archetypal layer, they include things like Well, everybody knows about the phallic symbol. Anything phallic shaped, anything that's basically penis shaped, refers to sexual content. It has some sexual nature to its meaning. This is universal and on the archetypal layer. But that's one that everybody knows about. Some dream symbol meanings on the archetypal layer that not so many people are familiar with would be the hero versus the shadow. You know, the hero versus the shadow, both of these are figures. They're people that appear in your dreams. The hero represents everything that you like about yourself, everything that you wish you were, whereas the shadow is the exact opposite. The shadow is the frightening version of you that is everything you're ashamed of, everything that you don't want to admit to yourself is you, everything that you don't want to be. The hero figure and the shadow figure are both archetypal layer. Now, the form that the hero and the shadow takes will change in the upper layers, and I think you'll see this as the video progresses. But the basics of the hero figure and the shadow figure are archetypal layer meanings for dream symbols. And of course, another archetypal dream symbol that not so many people are aware of would be the house that you live in. In this dream, your home. Carl Jung referred to the house as the mansion of the soul. And the reason for this is because on the archetypal layer, your house represents your soul. You can look at the condition of your dream house and you can recognize what kind of shape your soul is in. Does the house look nice? Is it well kept? Does it look strong and sturdy? If that's the case, then your soul is well kept, it's strong and sturdy, it's doing well. On the other hand, if it's kind of falling apart, if it's in very poor condition, then that means that your soul needs work. So now we move on up to the cultural layer. Now, one thing about these layers as we move up the layers, not all symbols exist on all three layers. See, on the cultural layer, the meaning of symbols is determined by the culture you were raised in. What country are you from? What religion are you raised in? What kind of music does your family listen to? What are the family dynamics? All of this is determined by the cultural layer. The stories that you were told as a child, or the stories that you watched on TV as a child. All of these aspects are on the cultural layer. They further determine the meaning of different dream symbols. Every time the meaning of a symbol on the cultural layer conflicts with the meaning of a symbol on the archetypal layer, the cultural layer will mostly override the meaning of the symbol. Once again, there is a little bit of bleed through, but not much. It's mainly the higher layer that determines the meaning of the symbol. So your culture will drastically affect the meaning of the symbol. If you were raised in a Christian household, well, the symbol of a dying man who has been tortured and nailed to a cross might transform from being an archetypal symbol of death and terror to a symbol of salvation, because that's the culture you were raised in. You look at the dragon. In dream interpretation, a dragon in the West will oftentimes represent something frightening or sinister. Not so much anymore, but especially in Middle Ages, dragons were associated with the devil. But in the Far East, dragons were symbols of good luck. So that's another symbol that has changed drastically according to what culture you were raised in. Now, of course, moving on up, you've got the personal layer. And as you might have guessed, the personal layer is based on your personal experiences. Like the middle layer, this layer, if it has the meaning for a symbol, it will override both of the layers below it. Once again, there will be some bleed through, but for the most part, your personal experience with that symbol trumps your cultural experience with the symbol, which then in turn trumps the archetypal meaning of that symbol. All three of these need to be taken into account when you are interpreting your dreams. Now, with the personal layer, it's not just your personal experiences with the symbol that need to be taken into account. The personal layer is also determined by your current circumstances. The current job that you have will affect dream symbol meaning on the personal layer. Do you like your job? Do you hate your job? Are you lukewarm to it? Do you feel like the job is holding you back? Do you feel like the job is propelling you forward? All of this needs to be taken into account with the personal layer, because everything that's happening now has just as much importance to you as what has happened back then. So, in order to further explain what I'm talking about here, we are going to use this sword to describe the three layers of dream symbol meaning that I have been talking about here. Now, on the archetypal layer, a sword is a long, phallic-shaped object. That means that on the archetypal layer, this sword represents a meaning of sexual nature. It represents sex, simply because of its shape. This is pre-programmed in. All human beings have this. The simple shape of this item will give it a sexual nature to its dream symbol meaning. But when you move up to the next layer, the cultural layer, well, what do we see from swords there? On the cultural layer, in our childhood, we are told stories time and time again of the valiant hero using the sword to rescue whoever it is from the evil wizard in their castle. And so, on the cultural level, the sword takes on a very heroic meaning. Once again, on each layer, the meaning will mostly override the meaning of the layer beneath it. So, on the cultural layer, sword becomes a symbol of the hero. It becomes a glorious weapon for protecting the weak. But because of the phallic shape, there's still a little bit of sexuality going on in there, if you get my drift. But then you move on up to the personal layer. A sword is an object that most people in our civilization will not have very much personal layer meaning attached to a sword. But let me tell you a story about something that happened to me once. When I was younger, I was very interested in sword play, and I wanted to learn how to actually sword fight. And I had found this man who was going to teach me. And I show up there ready to have him teach me how to sword fight, and I was all ready to play the part of the dashing hero and everything. And what this guy did was he held the sharp point of that fucker right to my throat. Right here. And he looked me right in the eye. And he said to me, "This thing is not a toy. It's not something for you to just swing around and play with. This is a weapon designed for the purpose of murdering other human beings. You will treat this object with the proper respect." And then he pulled the razor-sharp blade away from my neck, and he goes, "Okay, good, it's time for us to start learning." Most people in our day and age will not have that personal experience with the dream symbol of the sword, but I do. And once again, the meaning of a layer will override the meaning of the layers beneath this. For me, personally, this is not such a heroic symbol. For me, This thing represents a razor-sharp killing tool that was held to my neck. The reason why I tell you this is because there are hardly any dream interpreters alive today, hardly any psychiatrists, hardly anybody who studies dream symbolism at all who has that experience of having a sword held to their throat. And because of that, none of them are qualified to interpret the meaning of this symbol for me. So that is what I want you to understand about dream interpretation and the 3 layers of meaning. The archetypal layer, the cultural layer, and the personal layer. Each layer vastly affects the meaning of the symbol, and each layer tends to override the meaning of the layers beneath it. And the farther up you go in the layers, the more personalized the meaning becomes. No matter how much of an expert a person is in dream symbolism, they will only truly be able to interpret for you the meanings of the first 2 layers. All human beings have the same meaning on the archetypal layer, but on the cultural layer, you pretty much need someone from the same culture you're from in order to understand the cultural layer. And nobody but you understands that personal layer. Although a really good dream interpreter can try. They can learn as much about you as they can. They can learn as much about your life, your surroundings, what you feel about those surroundings. They can make a good attempt at being able to interpret for you that top layer. But ultimately, only you can do it. So if you want your dreams to be interpreted, ultimately you're going to have to learn how to do it. Because on that top layer, you're the only person who really has a clue. So learn the symbols for that archetypal layer. Learn the symbols for that cultural layer. And your own memories and emotions will be your guide for that top layer. This is Dax. I love you all. And until next time.